Okay, we're continuing now. So the learning objectives here is the advantages and disadvantages of using licensing as a market entry strategy. So this is what we're going to first talk about, and then we're going to discuss different other forms of, so basically from the most simple form to the most complex of directly investing in a country. So this is how it looks in terms of the level, the degree of involvement and the cost of involvement. So the easiest is what I was just talking about, exporting. So we could, as we spoke there, we have different options for exporting. And last time we covered some of these details. Then the next option we have is licensing. So licensing is one step further. So basically we give the rights to somebody to, for example, work with our product and do something with it. So I'm going to go now through all the stages, but the next is contract manufacturing, joint venture, and equity stake or acquisition. Now, the question is which strategy should be used. This will depend on things like our vision, our attitude towards risk, how much capital we have, how much control is desired. So in a licensing agreement, we have specifically agreement whereby one company, the licensor, makes an asset available to another company in exchange for royalty, license fees, or some other form of compensation. So under licensing agreement, we could be giving the right to another company to use a patent, trade secret, our brand name, or product formulations. Licensing is a very popular form. Like in 2016. The worldwide sale of licensing goods has totaled $263 billion. The advantages of licensing is that it provides additional profitability with little initial investment. It's a way of circumventing tariffs, quotas, and other export barriers. It's attractive as a return on investment. Mainly because it has low cost to implement. And through the licensing, we give licensees the autonomy to adapt product to local tastes. So why is this an advantage? Because we don't need to think so much, and not just think, but spend money on market research and adaptation to local taste, because they take this upon themselves as a responsibility. The disadvantages, I think, probably clear. So we have limited control on what happens. That could mean that we will lose all the returns. So one thing is what we plan. So ideally, this can give us a good return on investment, but we can also lose them exactly because we don't have control on what happens. Such agreements could have a very short life. And also there's a big probability that the licensee may become competitors. So they can decide to go on their own now that they know certain how we do things. And they also can just exploit company resources. And again, we may at the end lose from the relationship. Two main different licensing arrangements we know kind of is most special. One is contract manufacturing and the other is franchising. So under the contract manufacturing, the company provides technical specification to a subcontractor or local manufacturer. They allow the company to, so basically such an arrangement means that our company, if we are the one giving the license arrangement, could really specialize in product design, in innovation, in developing the brand. And we're not thinking at all of production, because developing the brand, innovating the brand is completely different activity as a type of activity from production. So it's kind of, in a way, we're outsourcing the production to somebody else, and we just focus on product design. Now, something like this is what Apple does. So Apple does not produce any phone. There's another company which produces it. And this is the third point here is exactly what happened to them. A few years ago, the company that was producing the phone was, they filmed actually really bad working conditions, and the accusation came to Apple. Apple's first reaction was, we are not producing, I mean, we're just having a contract with this company. The problem with that is this doesn't work in today's world anymore. So in general, we expect it as a company to guarantee that everybody in our supply chain is working according to in an ethical way. So if we're going for contract manufacturing today, we absolutely need to make sure in our contract that if we have certain environmental or ethical requirements, that those are clear and the other party agrees to them. Franchising is another type of licensing arrangement. Again, here, it allows us to focus on marketing, on building the brand, on product design, and then it allows, basically through the franchising, we outsource, subcontract, so to say, all the operational activities. Again, similarly here, this allows for a much better focus of the company. So as a company, we don't need to think again of all the cultural differences, labor relations, difficulty in finding locations. This is all given to a local partner in return for a fee, and usually this is combined also with a lot of training, so that we make sure, training and other assistance, so that we make sure the franchisee is really working according to our standards. When we decide, I mean, when we're deciding whether to do a franchise or not, we need to think of things like, would local consumers buy the product? How tough is the local competition? Does the government respect things like trademark and franchise rights? Because if they don't respect them, then we run the risk of losing the operation at some point. Also, can we easily take our profits? Because usually in a franchise operation, we share, the franchisee pays certain fee, but then also shares with us part of the profit. So if there are local regulations against making difficult or forbidding repatriation of profits, obviously we cannot go with this form. Another big issue is, can we buy the supplies we need locally? So I know that McDonald's, when they open in a new country, one of the first things they do is they find local farmers who are willing to do, for example, to plant exactly the potatoes they want, exactly in the way they want them, cut them, I mean, process them basically to the level they need. And this is with each and every product. We need to we actually work with the suppliers to train them how they want their products, how they want their supply. So sometimes this could actually turn to be very difficult. Another possible problem is, it may in some places it's very difficult to find commercial space, or if you can find it, it's too expensive. So this sometimes in itself is a restriction for not doing a franchise. And also when we're choosing a local franchisee, we really need to make sure that they financially can pull this off, so they're financially sound, and we can work with them. We understand the basis of the franchise, and we feel we can really work with them. And we're convinced that this is going to be a good collaboration. Now, we finished with the forms where we are not really moving to the new country. We're just, through different forms of contractual relations, we are doing some activity. And here we're moving now to the case where we actually indeed making an investment. So when a foreign company makes an investment in another country, we call this foreign direct investment. And again, here we have certain forms. So we have joint ventures, minority or majority equity stakes, and now outright acquisition. Joint venture is the first one. So joint venture is a strategy we can use for entering new market, where we basically come together with a partner and share ownership in a newly created business entity or a new project. Similarly to what we discussed so far, this is a way of making sure that we have a partner who understands the local conditions and who take care of certain aspects of the business that we don't need to think about. However, here we're talking about partnership, so it's not like completely outsourcing. So when I say we don't have to think about it, I'm more talking about we will be involved in every decision. So we're doing these things together, but we have, if we have weak points, so to say, not understanding fully the local market, then we can rely on our partner. That's why it says here that such joint venture builds upon each partner's strength. So usually you look for partners where when you come together, kind of it's 1 + 1 doesn't make 2, but makes 3, 4, 5. So there is a synergy which scales the impact of the relationship. We're giving you here several examples where car manufacturers did that. So the advantages this allows for risk sharing, financial and political. It provides opportunity to learn a new environment. So in other words, we enter a new environment without having to really master every single aspect of operating in that country. Provides opportunity for achieve synergy. This is the point I was making. And sometimes we are in a position that this is the only way we can enter the market, because there are certain barriers to entry. Some of them could be very explicit. So in some countries, it's a requirement to come make a joint venture with a local company in order to enter the market. The disadvantages, obviously, is we are now more involved, both financially and with other resources. So when we compare to a licensing agreement, we're sharing rewards, not just risk. So obviously, profits and other rewards need to be shared between the partners. This requires really strong coordination, really good skills for collaboration between very different companies. So each company comes with its culture, with its way of doing things. So this really requires people who really understand how to to work under such conditions. So it's not an easy thing to organize. I mean, it's easy thing to say we're going to do it, but actually when you get to doing it, it could become, there's a lot of other things that could happen. Here also, we run the risk that a partner may become competitor, because here you have to imagine, here we're going into this partnership. So basically there's no secret, so to say. We need to, in order to make this partnership successful, we need to give everything we have. And in that relationship, we could learn strategic things about us, which can help them to compete better with us in another market. The next opportunity is straight investment. And this could be done in several different ways. So we could take an equity stake. This means that we buy part of a company. If our stake is less than 50%, this is considered minority stake. And if it's more than 50%, it's considered majority stake. If we could also take full ownership, so this would be more like a acquisition if we take full ownership. While in the other case, it could be more considered a merger. So a merger is two companies coming together, forming sometimes more than two, but let's say two is the most typical case. They come together and form they become one company, actually. Sometimes these mergers, both names of the companies remain. So if the merger is kind of on an equal basis, both their names remain in the name of the company. More often than not, one of the partners is stronger. And actually, when we call it acquisition, so they are buying the other company, and in those cases, mostly the company name continues as the original, as the main partner's name. There's something we call greenfield investment. Greenfield investment is if we, for example, go in a country and we start building a factory from scratch. So it's called greenfield because we take probably even land that was not industrial before. So it could be a greenfield and we build on that a factory. The alternative to that is brownfield investment, which involves, it could be an existing factory, for example, that we buy, or it could be some urban development that we take and we redesign, redo for our own purposes. Here are some examples of market entry and expansion through a joint venture. So specifically, the examples here relate to General Motors. So you see in how many cases we actually go in joint ventures with Indian company, with Japanese, and so on. So here the list continues. And you can see here the variation. So in many cases, this is a 50-50 joint venture, but in some cases it could be, for example, 25-75. In general, 50-50 joint venture is very, it sounds attractive, but it's actually very difficult to operate because you need consensus always of all parties. And that's not always easy to have. Okay, and here are a few more examples of investment in equity stake, for example. So Fiat, for example, bought 20% stake in Chrysler first, and that became kind of an entry point, after which Fiat took Chrysler out of bankruptcy. So basically they completely acquired them. And you have a few more examples with General Motors. Yeah, a few more examples here. For example, Volkswagen acquired first 31% stake in Škoda in the Czech Republic, worth of $6 billion. This was back in 1991 after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Then later it was increased to 50.5 and up to 70 afterwards. So you see that sometimes this is a good strategy. We enter with a smaller stake, and then step by step we acquire bigger. Of course, this is not always possible, but it's a good strategy if we in the beginning cannot take bigger stake, or if we don't want to take such a big risk immediately, because later we are much more, we now know the company, we know advantages and disadvantages, so we're much more, it's less risky to do it in stages probably. Again, it's not always possible. Now, if we go for acquisition, so basically acquiring a whole other company, there are a number of issues. Now, one of the reasons we see more and more acquisitions is because in today's globalized environment, it becomes more and more difficult for companies to compete on the global market by themselves. So very often this becomes a decision they make to join a bigger company, and in this way ensure their future. So also such ownerships, they circumvent tariffs and quota barriers, because all of a sudden the company is a local company, so it falls under different regulations. So that's another reason why so many acquisitions have been happening. As we said, the alternatives to enter the market are licensing, joint ventures, minority or majority equity stake, and ownership. So when we, depending on which of these we choose, this also comes together with, I mean, it's part of a bigger strategy of how we enter the market and expand. And sometimes, very often actually, companies use a combination of those. So they enter in one way as a preparation, then they move to another opportunity later. So it's very often done in stages. Sometimes also this is such agreement is a preparation for entering ourselves. So we use in the very first point, for example, licensing, as a way to get to know the market, and then we move in ourselves. There is also one other form of collaboration, international collaboration, and that is global strategic partnerships. They could be, there's variations of that, so they're known also, some of them, as collaborative agreements, strategic alliances, strategic international alliances, global strategic partnerships. The most famous such strategic alliances are in the airline industry, where we have several of those. So they've really proven successful because companies come together specifically to, in the case of the airline companies, they come together to deal basically as a way of it's a way of offering customers combined routes. So it's like you form a partnership where you make sure that you basically you increase the market share of all the partners and make it easier for customers to bundle offers from these companies, and as a result you increase market share. So when we talk about the nature of global strategic partnerships, We can look at the independence of participants, the shared benefits, and ongoing contributions. So it's about depending on how we define, how deep we go on each one of these, this defines the different nature of the partnerships. So let's see, what are the characteristics? First of all, participants remain independent. So they're not merging, they're not exchanging equity ownership, nothing like that. They only actually come together, usually to share the benefits of working together. There is a mutual control over the performance of a range of tasks, but there's no no control over the rest of the operation of the company. So we're continuing to act completely independent. For example, if there's a common booking system for flights, this control of the partners is over the way this is done, but nothing else in the way we run the business. There is also a commitment to ongoing contributions in technology, products, and other key strategic areas that enable for example, if it's a booking system that requires investment in technology, so we have joint contribution there. So the attributes of true global strategic partnership is that it's several partners coming together for a joint long-term strategy. So it's not something we do briefly and then it's not like for a few months. This is a long-term arrangement for many years. Relationship is reciprocal. So basically it means there is a certain agreement that needs to be followed by all parties in the same way. The relationship is organized along horizontal lines. So basically we have companies from the same industry working together. It's not like vertical will be if we involve supply chain partners. There's nothing like that here. So for example, in the airline alliances, it's only airline companies. Also, this strategic alliance could be for specific markets. So it doesn't have to be for the whole world, although sometimes it may be. But in general, it's always signed for a specific market. So in the markets where we don't operate, where the alliance is not operating, they can continue with their national identities. Now, how successful an alliance will be depends on how good the mission of the alliance is, how clear it is, and how beneficial it is for everybody. So ideally, we want a situation where everybody wins. We need also very good strategy and good governance. Governance relates to how we taking decisions, how is authority and responsibility assigned, and how do we make sure, what do we do if there are problems? So if conflicts arise, if lower quality of service, for example, happens, how do we deal with that? The second set of, here we're continuing with the second success factors. Culture is of crucial importance. Actually, in many cases, culture becomes a big problem because contracts say, for example, they specify certain things, but how we interpret them and how we really put them into practice could be very different. That's why culture comes in place. So it's very important here also to agree on certain values, certain ways of behavior that relate to the common way of doing things. Otherwise, we may run serious problems with the alliance. We need also good organization, so it's not so easy to whatever we're doing together, it usually involves many companies, many different countries, different operations, so good organization is paramount, and good management. This is of key importance. Now, specifically here, we're giving some ideas to what has happened specifically in alliances with Asian competitors. So one of the aspects kind of we've learned through has been a learning point for the years is that Western companies cannot come into Asia and just have a superiority attitude. Actually, they have to learn from Asian firms' excellence in manufacturing and overcome the not invented here syndromes. So basically, in the very first year of globalization, when it was starting, I think companies had more of a superiority attitude. So the company that is expanding was having the feeling that they know better. In today's world, we know now that it's in order for things to work out, we need to learn from each other, and actually the best products and services happen when we capitalize on the excellence of each partner. So there's a lot to learn from each other. Specifically in the first Asian alliances which were made, there's we give in your book really good kind of longer explanation of this, but one of the things was partners had different dreams. So they would go into partnership, but they actually have very different understanding on what is the dream, what is it we want to achieve. There needs to be also this mutual understanding that we need to both contribute, and we go into this interdependence, which requires it's not about, again, it's not about superiority, one partner being stronger than the others, but it's about building a collaboration, this interdependence. We need to be very realistic also about learn more about each other, realistic about differences, and open to learn from each other as far as management philosophy, expectations, different approaches, and so on. There are some specific Asian examples of cooperation. For example, in Japan, we have the Keiretsu, which is inter-business alliance or enterprise groups in which business families join together to fight for market share. Essentially, these are in the sense of kind of economic science, these are cartels, which in some countries are forbidden, but in Japan, this is actually tolerated, and they have actually been at the core of the big industrial success of Japan, the end of last century, because these groups, these family-owned enterprises, they actually were helping each other. So yes, they were competing on certain aspects, but they actually helped each other a lot. There was this, even executives could legally sit on each other's boards. So that meant that they learned a lot from each other, and as I said, this is at the bottom of the industrial success of Japan. So horizontal examples of horizontal keiretsu are the big six. You see the companies. So basically, these are companies with the same type of business. They really have huge power because they can really block foreign suppliers. They can. I mean, there's a lot of different ways in which they can exercise their power, because by coming together, then you can imagine they dominate the market when it comes to, as buyers, for example, of certain products, or as sellers of certain products. There are also vertical keiretsu. So this would be an alliance between, for example, manufacturers and retailers, or manufacturers and suppliers. Again, they could be the difference between kind of small success and major success. Self-career also has something which is similar in terms of end result, so to say. Again, this is also considered to be behind the driving force behind self-career's economic miracle. Again, we have dozens of companies, usually centered around a bank or holding company, and dominated by a founding family. So we see this with Samsung, LG, Hyundai, and Daiwa. Yeah, so again, similarly to what we discussed for Japan, according to international kind of economic principles, this is also a case of colluding. And there have been also certain accusations as far as colluding with politicians also, and corruption. In terms of 21st century cooperative strategies, we have a lot of ways in which companies are coming together. So they're more based on the international principles that we consider to be progressive, so to say. Again, there are some alliances of companies that come together for certain purposes. For example, there's an alliance of all companies involved in artificial intelligence. So by forming such an alliance, companies usually share some of the investment initially that's required, or they exchange information, which allows all of them to progress faster. So some of these strategic alliances sometimes could be with, for example, a super alliance among global giants could be approaching with revenues $1 trillion. So this, when companies who are already powerful come together, this could be, I mean, it's a very powerful alliance, right? There is also a phenomenon now called virtual corporation. So basically, it's about numerous collaborations assembled only when they're needed. Again, this provides for certain flexibility. It's easier, let's say, done. You come for a certain purpose, then you dissolve. So when we are talking about what market expansion strategies we can form, we have the possibility of, depending on our market concentration or market diversification, or our country concentration or country diversification, we can have very different strategies. So, for example, if we're concentrated on specific country and specific markets, this is narrow focus. While if we are diversified both as markets, types of markets we service, and diversified as in terms of type of countries we service, we have global diversification, and you have the other options as well. So depending on which one it is, our overall strategy will be different. The tools we use will be different. And this is a decision we need to make in advance. So are we seeking new markets in existing countries? Are we seeking entering new markets? And are we doing new products, existing products? So these are all questions we need to be clear about. And once we know that, it's much easier to form a good strategy. Okay, so with this, we finished with this section. So I would like now to go into, do you have any questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to go, did you read the case of Jaguar? Did you have a chance? The case study. I will share my screen again. 1 second. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about that case, and afterwards we'll go into a break. You probably all know Jaguar as a company. So Jaguar is one of Britain's most iconic brands. In 2 years ago, they celebrated their 85th anniversary. So for Jaguar has an interesting history. So initially it was a private company. Then at some point it was nationalized. So it became state-owned. Then it was privatized again. And I believe, which year was this? In 1989. So basically in 1984, Jaguar became a standalone company, and then in 1989, it was acquired by Ford. So at that time, Ford as a company lacked a high-end luxury model. So they, the problem is, so they looked at acquiring Jaguar as an opportunity to get into that market, but the problem was the brand image of Ford was more synonymous with bread and butter cars, which means kind of more usual kind of daily cars. Well, Jaguar had the image kind of a more luxury special car, so there was a bit of a clash there. Ford, however, had very big ambitions. Actually, a little later, they also bought Land Rover. So they acquired both Jaguar and Land Rover. And they had a really big plan for investing. So they decided to invest heavily into updating and upgrading Jaguar's plant facilities with the idea to improve productivity, to improve also kind of to make the production more contemporary, hence more effective, more able to produce quality cars. So Ford's cumulative investment reached $6 billion. I mean, this is a huge investment. However, I mean, they had some new cars which they decided to launch on the market, but basically, to cut the long story short, just 1 second, I wanna. Okay, At one point, they decided to sell to Tata. Now, in the first year of ownership, Tata Motors, also this is a big Indian company you probably know, Tata Motors lost $500 million. And that was time also the global economy began to have problems, which hit seriously the sales of luxury cars. They had success with some models. And actually, they started seeing the results of the big investment Ford made. They did do also some improvements in investment, but the biggest benefits were really coming out of the long-term investments and strategy which Ford started. As John Edwards, the brand director of Land Rover, noted, Ford laid out a good foundation for us, but I think we were more nimble. Okay. So Tata continued to invest. So despite the big loss in the beginning, we invested another 500 million pounds to enlarge the Jaguar factory. We also continued to improve the technology using industrial robots, like really bringing the production in the 21st century. They introduced a technology according to basically a way of organizing the plant and technology, which allowed to produce several different models at the same time. So this was also a big advancement. And they made, what's interesting here from global marketing point of view, they made adjustments to cars depending on the markets they wanted to service. So for example, they made available an optional VX engine for the first time. They started with, they made some adjustments, for example, for American buyers living in areas where winter snow and ice makes all-wheel drive a necessity. What was interesting is that in such moment of huge investments, due to the difficulties in the world economy, they also reduced some prices by approximately 10% and announced a more comprehensive warranty. They also recognized that they lack, they don't have an SUV model. An SUV is a car that was big demand, selling really well in the competitors, out of the competitors' range. So they introduced also an SUV, which was a huge success, as well as in 2016, they introduced their first electric vehicle, going head-to-head also with Tesla. So as you see, this whole entering of a new market for India it's not an easy route. It's very expensive as an operation. It requires really a lot of things could wrong along the way, but they pulled it very successful. And they're giving example here that one of their cars now is produced in the factory of another company, because Jaguar's UK manufacturing operations are currently operating at 100% capacity. In order for them to do that, it means they're very successful in selling all their products. So the questions here are, like to pay attention to the whole, like it's interesting, why did Jaguar and Land Rover prospered under the ownership of Tata Motors? So do you have a an opinion on that. Anybody? Why was Tata Motors so successful? Okay. So I think here we see a good example of a company that understood the challenges they were facing with regard. So first of all, the brand. So this is a case of acquisition, right? So they're totally buying an existing company. This existing company had a very recognizable brand. But they made a number of, so they had a very good knowledge. First of all, they invested a lot in technology. As we said, the company was already on a good journey, but they continued to invest. They really made contemporary the plans, and they introduced a lot of new products, knowing where they want to export them, knowing the strengths of the brand. They introduced also new models and managed to reposition the company internationally as a new contemporary modern quality vehicles. So, okay. We're gonna go into break now.